Paul Manafort and his business associate Rick Gates indicted. I'm going to tell you why I couldn't care less and why this won't affect President Donald Trump even one little bit. Paul Manafort and his business associate Rick Gates surrendered to federal authorities this morning in Washington, D.C. Now, we know that Bob Mueller's camp, I believe it was Robert Mueller, the special counsel himself, but his camp leaked news of the indictment to CNN on Friday evening. Now, of course, the Democrats, the never-Trumpers, the progressives were just giddy all weekend. They imagined Donald Trump being hauled out of the White House in handcuffs. They thought it was going to be General Flynn. They thought it was going to be Donald Trump Jr. They thought it was going to be somebody close to the president. But many of us in media did what we do, and we tapped our sources. And my sources in federal law enforcement said to a person, it's Manafort and probably on FARA violations, Foreign Agents Registration Act violations. Well, my sources were right, as were the sources of many others. We found out this morning that it was a 12-count federal indictment against Manafort and Gates on charges ranging from conspiracy against the United States to making false statements to investigators. But the crux of it really is FARA, legal wire transfers. Basically, what's being alleged in a nutshell is Paul Manafort hid money that he earned from foreign governments. A little more intricate than that. The indictment is up on the Department of Justice's website. You can read it. But this segment isn't about Paul Manafort. I personally never liked Paul Manafort. If Paul Manafort did these things, then he has to answer for these things. Paul Manafort was always the wrong guy to run Donald Trump's campaign, and luckily it was only for a few months. He wanted Trump to tone down the style that saw Trump mercilessly beat 16 primary opponents. I had very close associates on the Trump campaign, very senior people, to a person. They did not like Paul Manafort, and they found Rick Gates for the short time he worked on the campaign with Manafort. Well, they found Rick Gates, quote, a disaster. That's what they told me. He was a disaster, didn't know what he was doing. And the president soon realized that. Well, he was the candidate at that point, and he fired them. This will not touch President Trump in the least because these charges go back to 2006. In fact, the last charge upon which they were indicted was in 2015. 2015, a full year before Paul Manafort ever even got involved with the Trump campaign. In other words, this has nothing to do with the Trump campaign and nothing to do with Trump-Russia collusion, which is why Mueller's investigation now needs to be shut down. Look, these might be very serious financial crimes. Paul Manafort might be guilty. He might not be. He's going to have his day in court. His lawyer, the defense team, will have a chance to present their case, as will Gates. But that's not the issue here. The issue is where Mueller went. Now, it is within the authority of the special prosecutor, special counsel, to charge for any and all crimes that they might discover in the course of their investigation. But this really wasn't within his scope. This wasn't within Mueller's scope. So now, U.S. taxpayers are footing the bill for a 9-figure fishing expedition. And that's problematic. This is precisely why these kinds of crimes are precisely why we have a Department of Justice. But these days, we don't seem to. We have an attorney general who is completely MIA. We have a deputy attorney general in Rod Rosenstein who's compromised. He was lead prosecutor when the Uranium One case was suppressed by the Holder Department of Justice, Eric Holder's Department of Justice, for 4 years. That is a very big problem. We do not seem to have a functional Department of Justice, and we cannot have these independent special prosecutors running around doing whatever they want to do. It's a massive waste of taxpayer money, but it's also a constitutional crisis. Robert Mueller virtually runs unchecked. Rod Rosenstein certainly isn't reining him in. Now, look, again, if Paul Manafort did these things, Paul Manafort should be prosecuted for these things. And if he's found guilty, he should serve time in prison for doing these things. If he's acquitted, he should be left alone and allowed to live his life peacefully. But again, that's not the issue at hand. The issue at hand is we now have a shadow Department of Justice. What's even more problematic is these charges go back to 2006. The bulk of them between 2008 and 2015, when Barack Obama was president. And it begs some very serious questions. If all of this was so egregious and so overt, why didn't Barack Obama's Department of Justice look into Paul Manafort? Why didn't James Comey or Robert Mueller's FBI look into Paul Manafort back then? It can't be because they didn't know this was going on. That can't be. Paul Manafort was a public guy. He operated in Washington, D.C. circles. The rumors were out there. It begs a different kind of question, though. Paul Manafort was only with the Trump campaign for a few months. However, he worked with the Podestas, the Podesta Group, Tony Podesta, John Podesta's brother's lobbying firm, for years. He was an associate of the Podesta Group for years. So could it be that Obama's FBI, Obama's Department of Justice, under Holder and Lynch, and the FBI under Mueller and Comey, didn't look into Manafort because they didn't want it to wind up where it would have inevitably wound up, on the doorstep of the Podestas. The Podestas, Democratic Party benefactors, the Podestas, like this with the Clintons. That's a question that needs to be asked and a question that needs to be looked at. And it's another question that solidifies one thing. Robert Mueller has far too many conflicts of interest to remain special counsel. We don't need a special counsel. We have a Department of Justice. And look, I'm sick of hearing that calls for Mueller to resign or be fired because of his conflicts of interest are biased or partisan. They're not. When Patrick Fitzgerald was appointed special counsel and he was looking into who leaked the name of Valerie Plame during George W. Bush's administration, no one on the right asked Fitzgerald to resign because of conflicts of interest, because he had none. I think Fitzgerald was heavy-handed. I think he went on a witch hunt and persecuted people. But I never thought he should resign for conflicts of interest because there were none to be found. Mueller's are glaringly obvious. Now, what would give the president political cover, perfect political cover, is the next series of indictments include the Podestas. If they do, if they include those darlings of the Democratic Party, the Podestas, it would be the perfect time for the President of the United States and Jeff Sessions to shut the investigation down and let the Department of Justice take over. And if Jeff Sessions won't do it, President Trump needs to find an attorney general that will. If you like this content as much as I love bringing it to you, and I want to bring it to you every day, please subscribe to our premium service at www.therebel.media/shows. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you very, very much. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks so much for watching.